views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Hey there, nice to see you. Happy New Year to everybody in the borough of the Bronx. It's time for the Bronx Buzz. This is our first show of 2020, and we've got a wonderful show for you this evening. For folks who don't know, the Bronx Buzz is BronxNet's program where we interview journalists, writers, photographers, editors, filmmakers, anybody who puts stuff out in the media, and try to get you some insight as to who they are, what they're about, and what they're writing about, and a little bit of background about what they're thinking about when they go put pen to paper or fingers to keyboards, et cetera, et cetera. So this evening, let's get started. We're going all the way. We're crossing various rivers, and we're going to Brooklyn, New York, and we're going to say hello to David Brand. Nice to have you with us, David. We don't often do that, so definitely appreciate that. The reason we're doing that, David is the managing editor for the Queens Daily Eagle and also a frequent contributor to City Limits, and he wrote a couple of pieces that we thought were just tremendous and of particular interest to Bronxites. Dave, before we just talk about subject matter, a little bit about you. When did you get into journalism? What do you like about doing it? Just give us a little background.
Sure. So I'm kind of a mid-career changer because for many years I was a social worker, and I went to graduate school, got my master's in social work, and was a licensed social worker. Am a licensed social worker. I used to work with people experiencing homelessness, and especially people who used to be homeless in supportive housing. And so my passion was always journalism, and I had kind of suppressed that a bit. I started freelancing. Had some great opportunities at City Limits, built my portfolio that way, and was able to take over this job as editor of the Queens Daily Eagle. We're about a year and a half old. We started on June 25th, 2018. We are the only daily print English language newspaper in Queens.
I want you to hold it up. Yeah, that's what I wanted you to do. That's great. There it is, the Queens Daily Ledger. Now, is it sold in newsstands? Is it a free paper? Do you do it through subscriptions? Can you buy it in the, just give us a little, for people who want to know. I can't imagine why they'd want to know about Queens, but it's perfectly fine if they want to do that, and would certainly help you publicize what you do.
Well, we do it all of the above. So our website, first and foremost, queenseagle.com. And we do occasionally cover interborough stories, and I think one that we spent a lot of time on was the plan to close Rikers, and spoke with Ruben Diaz Jr. and the council members up in the Bronx, Councilmember Ayala, and activists who were opposed to the borough-based jails plan. So that was one of our forays into the Bronx. But we are also available at some newsstands in Queens, in and around the courthouses, and then we have a digital print subscription, which is a PDF of our version that is also available for subscription.
So for you, the passion, it's very logical that your passion would be to cover some of the things that you used to do and were very familiar with. Talk to me about what you, I mean, the homeless, call it a crisis, you want to call it a situation. The homeless situation in the city of New York right now is out of control. It's incredibly difficult. I think one of the last numbers I saw was 60,000 homeless people. I think the citywide 10% of the kids in New York City schools are homeless. In the Bronx, I think the rate is significantly higher.
Yep.
Just give us an overview, and then we'll talk some of the specifics about families that you wrote about.
So I would definitely use the word crisis to characterize the homelessness situation here in New York City. You mentioned that figure 60,000. That is just people in Department of Homeless Services shelters on a given night. It's always right around 60,000 lately. There are another untold number of people, tens of thousands, estimates well more than 100,000 total, living in other temporary living situations. Usually they call it doubled up, living in apartments with family, with friends, with other people, in apartments where their names do not appear on the lease. So they don't have really rights to that living situation, and it's an uncertain and unstable situation for them. You mentioned 10% of New York City public school students have experienced homelessness at some point in the previous school year, and that's really staggering to think that the number of homeless children alone is the size in New York City is the size of most moderately sized cities in our country.
That's right.
And
So if it's 10%, I mean, you're talking about 1 million kids in the schools. I mean, the easy math is 100,000 children. It's a staggering number.
Because this crisis has lasted for so long in our city, it's become part of the atmosphere, I think, and in a way, because it's less acute than certain things that crop up from time to time, it can fade into the background. And because it's such an enormous problem, and yet something that has been around for so long. So the point of this series for City Limits, because I'm a contributor for City Limits as well, is to kind of paint a better picture for readers of what the homeless population looks like in New York City, how families in particular make up the vast majority of the homeless people living in shelters and in other temporary living situations throughout the city. And the face of homelessness in New York City is young families, typically headed by single mothers, and single mothers of color in particular. And that is truly the face of homelessness in New York City right now.
Is it and you and others have analyzed the problem and looked directly at the affordable housing shortage, and is that the main culprit here, or are there other extenuating circumstances that maybe the general public is not aware of?
There are certainly extenuating circumstances, or maybe exacerbating circumstances. The comptroller's office, Scott Stringer's office, came out with a report that found that domestic violence was a huge driver, or is a huge driver of homelessness, for example. But ultimately, there are dual crises. That's a crisis of affordable housing, a lack of truly affordable housing, that contributes to the homelessness crisis.
I had done some work with POTS, which is a rather well-known support system for people who are homeless, literally 20 years ago. And among the things that I learned at that time, and I'm pretty sure it still applies, is that the stereotype of homeless people is maybe not accurate, because many of those people literally were going to the soup kitchen to have lunch on their break from work. So do you have a sense of, I don't know, how many are working homeless? Because, you know, it's not like they're homeless and they just sit in the shelter all day. Many of them have jobs that just don't pay the bills enough to get a place to live.
I think one of the most disturbing, maybe representative things that I've encountered was in my time working with homeless young people in particular. I remember one young woman she was staying at a drop-in center for homeless young people, 24 years old or younger. And she was also a security guard on the overnight shift at a homeless shelter. And so that really illustrates the problem, that not only are people who are experiencing homelessness working, a huge proportion of them are working, they're working in jobs where they're serving their fellow New Yorkers.
This reflects actually a story that just came out that you had written. I guess another part of the series is that the idea that people who are homeless parents once were homeless themselves. And that is scary, because that means that they never were able to break the cycle through, you know, growing up and saying, well, now you've gone to school and you can get an education and you can move out. I don't even know what to make of that. So maybe you could put some context for us.
Yeah, I think so you talk to some activists, some advocates for homeless New Yorkers, they'll say that cycle that concept of a cycle can be a little misleading, because it suggests that this is somehow inevitable, when really the way to end homelessness and to ensure that the next generation does not become homeless if they grew up in homelessness is to ensure that there is affordable housing, that there is access to services and to, you know, jobs that provide a living wage for the next generation of New Yorkers. And so with that story, it shows the number. So the most recent story in this series for City Limits shows the number of people experiencing homelessness who themselves are young mothers and young fathers, but particularly young mothers under 24 years old who are struggling to get jobs to support themselves, to support their families, and also struggling to get a foothold in the housing market, to get an apartment.
We're just about out of time, David. Many of the single and even young married people that I know who live in any of the outer boroughs, and certainly in Manhattan it's the case, they can't afford to live alone. And so I understand that if you have a family, paying $4,000 a month's rent, that is a very difficult situation to be in. And with children, it becomes very difficult to do what maybe a single person or a couple can do, and that is live with a roommate, in other words, have 4 different people. And that is what is going on, certainly in Brooklyn and Queens, in many places in the Bronx. And so I guess the next time we have you on, we're going to ask you for the silver bullet. if there is one. If you are, then you can be the mayor. David Brand from mostly the Queens Daily Eagle, but also a freelancer for City Limits. Thank you for joining us. And the fact that we made this contact means that we're going to call you again, and we hope you'll keep writing really important stuff. And we'll keep inviting you to be on the Bronx Buzz.
Thank you very much.
Great, all the best. There he is. Make sure you check out Queens Daily Eagle and, of course, City Limits at all time. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, you're going to love the person we're about to meet. And she's written a book, and she's a young high school student. We interviewed her a number of years ago on Bronx Talk, as a matter of fact. So we'll do that right after we do this.
Sure, I look cute now, but when my owner lost his job, it was rough. I was living on the street, and one night, me and this Cocker Spaniel got into it so bad, I wound up looking like an ice cream cone. I cried a little bit, but thankfully I got rescued, so I'm running, I'm jumping, all back to my old self, and I'm ready to give unconditional love, even if you put a lampshade on my head.
It's not always easy being a dad.
Do you have panda asthma too? Does that run in the family? This is the home of the most priceless kung fu artifacts.
But when you make an effort,
Dad, we're not supposed to touch anything. Oh, sorry. Go long, son.
it's always worth it.
Whoa, master!
The smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Take time to be a dad today.
I am gonna get you. I'm gonna get you.
Call 877-4DAD-411 or visit fatherhood.gov to learn more.
You know what, guys? There's a lot of tree branches and dry brush over here. We should probably move the bonfire over there.
I'm guessing Smokey liked that idea.
Hey, it's Ava, and this is Tess from Vivo's Do It Yourselfie, where we recreate the hottest looks from today's biggest music videos.
After cleaning out our closet, we have a lot of clothes we don't wear anymore.
Like this old t-shirt.
It's not garbage, it's actually a brand new rug.
And to make it, all you need to do is cut, tie, and glue.
Cut the t-shirt into strips.
Tie the strips into knots.
And glue the knots to the bath mat. I love it. Give your garbage another life.
And recycle.
Hey, back with you on the Bronx Buzz. I am really excited because it's actually an old friend. Fatou Boye was on our program on Bronx Talk, the other program. What did you say, 2 years ago?
Yeah,
almost
about
two and a half years ago. And the reason she was on the program is because she was one of the founders of an organization called Let 'Em Play, which emphasizes the notion that young people should have the opportunity to play sports in school. And she has moved ahead. She's gotten older like the rest of us, and she has now written an incredibly wonderful and important book called Living on the Edge. To grow, you must be uncomfortable. Tell me all about it. Fatou Boye, so nice to see you again.
Thank you for having me again.
So let's talk a little bit about your background. Now, you came here from where? And as I understand, even though the book is written completely in English, you didn't speak English when you came here. Talk about a little bit about your background.
Yes, so I am from Senegal, and I came to this country when I was 11, 12 years old. And as many immigrants coming to a new country without speaking the language can be a real challenge.
Especially as a child.
Especially, yes, as a child. It was extremely hard because I only spoke Wolof at that time, which is not really a language that is spoken
it's
by
not
the
even as common as French or Spanish or Italian or something like that.
So yes, it was completely hard for anybody to translate anything or to communicate with me. That was some of the challenges I went through being new in this country. So yeah, basically.
So you did it, you moved ahead. How big an influence on your growth and development did, number one, your experience at International Community High School, and also your experience with my buddy David Garcia Rosen and Let 'Em Play? Like, where did that fit in your growth and development?
Okay, so basically, like I said, I first came to the country without speaking any language, not even knowing how to write my own name. Middle school, basically, I will go there every single day, put my head down on the table, where my dad will get a call at the end of the day, every single day, that your child did no work. She was basically sleeping, putting her head down on the table.
You didn't know what else to do.
Yeah, and I was like, it was normal because I did not understand
that was normal,
anything.
but the teachers and people in school were like, oh goodness, she's not well, there's something wrong with her, who knows what.
Yeah, so from there, in middle school, actually, you don't need to get any work done to graduate. So I graduated
Don't
from
ever
there.
say that. I would never, but you did graduate.
I graduate, so then that's when I got into International Community High School, where I learned how to write my name and actually start to speak English. That's where I met David. And at that time, I actually have no hopes and that I could speak English or do anything out of.
So what turned it around? I just want to move it ahead because I want to talk about the book.
Sure. So the sports is.
Sports?
Yes. So the fact that it was there to motivate me, because to be in any sport team in high school, you have to have good grade, focus on your school and everything.
Attend every day.
Yeah. So that pushes me to actually go hard in my school.
And also it gave you friends who you might not have had friends with. You played soccer, and you had teammates and all that kind of thing. Boy, if that's not an advertisement for Let 'Em Play and the importance of making sure that we all put more resources so all the children have and young people have an opportunity to play. So then you graduated high school, you learned to speak the language, and now you're in college.
Yes.
And what do you do in college? And then we're going to get to the writing of this book.
Okay, so I'm in college, CWE, which is basically Undercity College. And what I do, my major in there, it's interdisciplinary studies with a focus on education and disability, basically.
You also told me that you do go back to the high school to do what? That was so interesting to me.
So International Community High School has built who I am. So as a way of me giving back to the community is that I go back every single year to teach seniors how to create a vision board, how to basically set our goals and achieve them within a time frame that you're set to achieve it.
And you love doing that because you say giving back, but you're basically teaching what you literally learned from high school and from growing up here in the Bronx.
Yes.
Why did you write Living on the Edge? To grow, you must be uncomfortable. One can only imagine that you could talk about that firsthand. Tell me about why you decided to write this book.
Okay, so I decided to write this book because from where I came from, it is so hard to hear anybody telling their stories. We automatically think that our stories are supposed to be a secret. It's our story, not knowing that once we share our stories, people can learn from it and grow from it. And
be proud.
Yeah, be proud of what you went through, and you never know whose life it might change.
And you thought your story was really worth telling. Now, I haven't had a chance to read it. So do you tell exactly where you were? In other words, basically in book form, document what you just explained to us?
Yeah, so basically in the book, there's many different things you could learn from it. I talk about gender, being a female, and going through language and cultural barriers, and also abuse, relationship problems. Basically, it has like all kind of things that we all go through in every
You know, we
basis.
have wonderful young people here from Bronx Equality Charter School who work on our program, and you know, I talk to them all the time. This is the kind of thing, you wrote it for, not specifically these students, but for all Bronx students, especially girls who have these kinds of issues.
Yes.
What is the message in the long run that either through the things that you learned or you know, what you were writing about, that you want people to understand?
So
especially young people.
Young
That's
people,
what it's
yeah.
about.
So what I want people to understand, especially immigrant, is that where you come from will never ever define where you're going. Because if you look at where I started from, I could not, never in a million years, will think I'll be where I'm at today.
I'm just going to interject with a friend of mine who's a motivational speaker, says you don't let your geography determine your biography.
That is so true.
Right?
Yep.
That is, you can use it in your next book. I mean, that would be perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Was the process of writing the book a difficult one for you?
Yes, it was completely difficult. As I mentioned in the book, coming from a place where I was labeled as someone who's not capable of reading, someone who's not capable of writing.
Boy, we sure showed them.
Yes. So being able to prove all of them wrong was just amazing. And not only that, it was hard. There was some point where I felt like giving up, but then there was this thing that I always look at as those people who are gonna read the story and be inspired by it. I always look at those people, what other path would they take if I do not write this book?
Who inspired you? Whether it be family or parents or teachers or friends or somebody else in a church group or a religious group. Who inspired you so that, because it'd be wonderful if you were the only, and you just did it from yourself, but I'm assuming there were people around you.
Yeah, so there's this person who's at my high school called Hassan Suso, happens to be a teacher of the year, 2019. So he inspired,
Listen, teacher of the year, you gotta go for it. Yeah,
so yes, he inspired me a lot from the first day I met him. He taught me how to be who I am basically today. He inspired me to go and wrote this book. I remember I was one of the speakers at his launch, and that really inspired me. I was like, wow, I need to have this type of launching, which was, and David as well inspired me in many different ways.
I guess one of the directors at that school.
Yeah. So he works at a different school now, but he...
Oh, he does? I wasn't even aware
Bronx
of that.
Academy letter. That's what he
that's
worked
right,
at.
yes.
Yeah. So he inspired me a lot through being active and going more into a fitness levels.
You know, I was thinking about you and your experience in school, and the first time we met and we had you on TV and we were talking about that. There are so many issues with public schools. This is a very good story of how the public schools can work and how great teachers can inspire young people, right?
Yes.
Talk a little bit about the writing of the book. You sat down and you knew what you wanted to write, or did it develop? And was it difficult to write? Did you get people to write, to edit, to talk about that process?
So it was definitely difficult at the beginning because I had no idea what to write on.
Did you decide to write it yourself, or did one of those mentors say to you, "Hey, why don't you write a book?"
So at school, actually, my college, sometimes I share my stories as my major is education. So as we talk in class, sometimes I'm like, wow, I think you should share your story. I remember one of my teacher, who I actually mentioned on the acknowledged page, told me, Fatou, I hope one day you will share your story out there.
Wow. And then you said, you know what? I got something
I
to
will,
tell.
yes.
Well, what don't people know generally about being an immigrant to this country, about being, like, what don't people fully understand, and what should people understand better about what it was like for you?
So the fact that when you come to the country, a lot of us, especially as women, is either we're here with only our fathers or only with our mother. And then what ended up happening?
Would you come with part of the family, and then they paved the way? I mean, to be honest with you, 100 years ago, my grandmother did the same thing. She came here as a 13-year-old girl, and then ultimately brought the family back, and now here I am, and we all are, you know.
Yes.
So go ahead, I'm sorry.
So when I first came, I was only here with my dad and two of my brothers. And my mom wasn't here, so I never had that woman figure. And I remember being 13 years old and start seeing my
parents. Not having mom around to guide you, right? That's very lonely.
It was really lonely, and I think people need to start to understand, especially if you're a teacher and you're dealing with students, you need to know what are they going through, not only in school, but also in their home bases. Because I believe every child out there deserves someone who they could call a mentor.
And you know, the subtitle here, to grow you must be uncomfortable. Yes. So those taught you amazing lessons. You are probably, and I'm talking mentally now, strong as an ox. You probably are confident, and you have, I'm sure, many wonderful things ahead. So ultimately, what are you going to do? Or I mean, we're going to write more books. I mean, you've told this story. I don't know what's next.
Yeah, I'm gonna definitely already start thinking of what do I want to write my next book on. So yeah.
Well, you are an absolute inspiration, and also for somebody who grew up in public schools and went to a public college here in the Bronx, you know, a great example of how this can work when you have the right people around you. So you know, congrats. So the book is Living on the Edge. Where can people get it? Can they get it
it's available at Amazon and also Barnes & Noble.
Well, so you can get it there. Well, that's about everywhere.
Yes.
Living on the Edge, to grow you must be uncomfortable. Fatou Boye, a Bronxite who exemplifies literally the best of the Bronx. Congratulations.
Yes. Thank you so
much. And now
you
really got to do me a big favor and sign my book.
Oh, sure. I will definitely.
You brought me a book, and I'm going to read it, and thank you so much. So I think that's going to about do it for us here at the Bronx Buzz for this evening while she signs the book. We will see you on Bronx Talk Monday night. We're going to talk about the bail reform and other criminal justice issues on Bronx Talk with the Bronx DA will join us on Monday night on Bronx Talk. And otherwise, we'll see you back here. Oh, she's writing nice things. We'll see you. And she's writing in English, ladies and gentlemen. She never knew how to do it, and she learned it here in the Bronx. Good night.